just want to capture basically you and your story.
Sure. Yeah, no problem, man.
Awesome.
So, yeah, let me know, man. I'll just unleash.
You have a question though?
I'll interview you after. I'm just kidding.
That's awesome.
I'm gonna start my own podcast now too.
Yeah.
Like I'm just interview podcasters.
Oh, you totally should. Yeah.
Because it's like actually I'm like this is kind of exciting. This whole moment, like everybody has all their podcasts. My wife's like, dude, I've been telling you for years. Like, she's like, she wanted me to do a podcast on like cooking for kids. Like for babies, like how to make cool baby food.
Hmm.
But who has time for podcasting? You do. That's why you're the professional, man.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a labor of love for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I can get into it. I mean, because it's really crazy. I think the string making has been a really huge part of the musical journey I've had. And it's kind of like, it's really weird when you think about like anytime there's been something really cool, historical, and you say, oh, wow, those painters hung out with those photographers and those, designers and those fabricators. Everybody was hanging out all of a sudden. It seems like what a magical moment. And you don't know you're in those moments until later. And then you realize, wow, like you connect to this bigger thing, this thread. And so it's kind of like, I really look at string making and I look at just music as that. Like I think we kind of look at like ourselves as individuals a lot of times, and like like American music industry as an industry, we think of like you're gonna fight, get to the top, and you're gonna make your hit, and you're that kind of thing you're thinking as an individual. Whereas like when you look back on it, we go, wow, remember that sub pop scene in Seattle, like wow, Mudhoney and all these great bands. You think about those things. And so kind of like looking back now, I'm like, wow, this has been a real amazing journey, and I get a job out of it. And, it's kind of funny, like, basically what it is that I come from, Mexican music, and where I was born in El Paso, we listen to everything, American music, Mexican music. And we're not just talking like just border music. We're talking like every single music in Latin America was bottlenecking through Juarez and El Paso. So we got everything from, all sides coming up and just filtering through the radio. So it's like, a lot of musicians I know that come from El Paso, they leave El Paso because there weren't a lot of musical opportunities. But these are some very, like, culturally fluid, players, people who could play country music, rock music, Mexican music, and, go easily back and forth. So, like, a lot of artists from El Paso were recording in LA, that kind of thing. So, my background is a lot of traditional music from my grandparents, from their era, but, they also, had me listening to big band jazz, and then all my, cousins and aunts and uncles in the house, because it was a big, a tiny house with a lot of kids in different generations, so I was getting a really good dose of pop music and rock music as well. So, it's like you have that sensibility, and I think, once it's in you as a kid, it starts guiding what you're going to do when you express it. So, once I got to playing guitar, and it was kind of an act of rebellion and everything, I was the kind of kid that was like, I want to learn how to play, and I want to learn everything about a guitar. I asked my grandfather for like the ugliest guitar he had, the one that was broken. And I went for a whole year learning on a broken guitar because I thought I needed to prove to myself. And, that I could do it and I could teach myself. And then I'm finding myself, using bread little twist ties for picks and stuff like that, and like tying strings together. So like when I see the nightmare pictures on Instagram of people with the most roadiest, of saddest guitars with, strings tied 3 times, I identify with that. Like, I get it. It's like, some folks really, really struggle really hard to like play music, and I'm always like amazed by music in the rest of the world that doesn't require a lot of gear. It's just like, right. Wow, these people are doing it. So it's funny. I felt like that's the spirit of string making too, and it was like, when I started really getting good and better and started becoming a professional, when I had guitars made for like traditional Mexican music, couldn't find the strings. And so the guys at Candela's Guitars in East LA said, hey, there's this crazy guy. He started the Los Lobos band, and now he makes guitar strings. And he makes them for our music. He makes them for mariachi. He makes them for, bolero music, for norteño music. And even, acoustic guitars and electric guitars, everything. He's crazy, and I was like, I need to find this guy. And so next thing you know, this guy shows us how he makes strings, and the process of how he makes strings for traditional instruments that you can't find in the stores, and that's why he started the company, is because he wanted to play harp and, folkloric music after he left Los Lobos after the first record. And he couldn't figure out, or he couldn't find the strings he needed. And when he could find them, they were either expensive and poorly made, or, a lot of it was poorly made stuff from poor materials. So he really poured in a lot of just time into learning how to make first harp strings, and then apply his just aesthetic to a whole line of guitar strings. And that was the dude who would make my strings. And, I got to touring, I got to doing all kinds of stuff and recording. I was doing stuff from movies, and I was just doing session work, and I was doing, small programs. I did some PBS, local PBS stuff, which got me a lot of work, which is funny. I had one of my musicians, and he's like, dude, I got to go to school in Santa Barbara. And it's like, well, you got to go to my string maker and, go say what's up. Maybe he'll give you a job. He did. And then that was Guadalupe Custom Strings. And that's where my partner, who I was teamed up with at Guadalupe Custom Strings, he was that apprentice. He was one of my musicians in my band. So when our founder, Francisco Gonzalez of Guadalupe Custom Strings, when he injured himself and he couldn't make strings anymore, really, he had to give up the business. And, he had been pouring all this money in research, but it wasn't really making any money. And it wasn't about that. It was really just about he'd sit you down for 3 hours, and I'm like, how's this dude making money? And then he wouldn't charge you. He wouldn't charge me. He literally would not charge me for making my strings. I think he was just really proud of what he was doing, and really eager to show people that, look, there is this world out there that, you get to participate. You get to have good strings for your weird instrument. We can do it. There is nothing to stop us from saying, oh, we got to order from here. I mean, this was no internet back then, you could not find this stuff. Turns out also this dude was involved in this heavy movement in Mexico to bring back this 400-year-old traditional music. And that was about to disappear. And it's it has its roots in Baroque music from Veracruz, Mexico. And turns out Francisco got together with someone from Mexico, and they standardized, the lutherie and the string making and the gauges and everything, so that folks could start having consistently made instruments. And that really kind of sparked, not solely, but it wasn't the only thing that sparked, this development and innovation, but it was something that really facilitated it. It proved that with a quality instrument and quality strings, the artist is then really unleashed. It really has a positive effect on the music making, which is the ultimate goal, which is why people make better guitars. It's not so much that you're going to make something better for its look or for its novelty, but you're making it so that it's easier to play, it sounds better, it's more rewarding, and that's kind of been the goal, or the unifying concept for what Francisco did. And then it kind of filtered into what I did. So when I joined up Guadalupe Custom Strings with Jacob, the musician was the apprentice, and then he became the string master. I wasn't making strings. I was just kind of doing a lot of quality control, trying to fix this business and establish more distribution, more standards and stuff, and just really fixing a lot of stuff that was wrong with the business before it could really be called a string company. And so once we started kind of stabilizing and growing, and mind you, we took it over right when the recession hit. So we were living in our shop, 3 of us, 4 of us, and there was a lot of weeks when we didn't have any work whatsoever. So we poured ourselves into just making better strings. I decided to take hex core completely out of the shop. We tossed it, thousands of dollars worth of wire, and I was like, that's done. And we went in and revamped everything with round cores that was steel based, And then I started designing like strings, first kind of testing and guiding the string makers. And then after when they said, I don't have time for you, I was like, all right, well, I had to just do it. So then I started designing like ukulele strings and different kinds of gypsy jazz guitar strings. And then, folks started asking for more weird stuff and take it on, like tenor guitars and then electric guitars. And then finally, I think it was, pretty much Salvage Custom, the pedal board company, Daniel Tag. He found me on the internet one day. He said, hey, I want to order some strings. And like, he really just was like, whoa, this is something different. And so then I was like, oh, okay, well, whatever. I don't know. They've been working for me on tour, and they've been great, and I've shared them a little bit, but nobody was really like, beating down the door for the electric guitar strings. And so then I started developing the line just as people were getting more and more interested. And it was just kind of like as the economy was starting to come back up. So it was the perfect time. And, early on, a lot of cool people started catching on, a lot of the pedal builders and the amp builders and professionals. And then I split off from Guadalupe just because we were having such a hard time managing what we were doing with the traditional line. And what I was trying to do with the new line, and then me managing the entire business of it and the distribution, all of it, it just got too crazy. And so it was kind of like almost like a dare. He's like, do you think you could do this? Handle your own, entity, do it. I'm like, yeah, do it. It was almost like either we were daring or insulting each other about it, but we were like, we just hit a point where we couldn't really make anything gel together. And so once we split off, it was amazing. We were still in the same shop, but it was just, I was working at my pace and working on my products and, building that whole like body of research and everything. And so it was cool. Like Guadalupe was like my ability to learn the business, learn the trade, make a lot of great relationships, really like stabilize that. And then, learn the craft over years. Yeah, obviously it's been like since 2008 that I really was like involved heavily in the string business. So other than that, I had been like a tester and like, client and stuff, and just, a consultant, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, I want to dig in a little further into that story here in a minute, but I want to go way back to the beginning. And you said that you picked a guitar from your grandfather. Now, did he play?
Yes. My grandfather and grandmother, they both play and still actively do music. My
Awesome.
he's in his 90s, and my grandmother's in her 80s, and they were like church music leaders for like ever. Like my wife is also from El Paso, and she lived there actually she's not from there, but her family's from there. She lived there for years. And she was joking about, this old lady that sings in the church really loud. I was like, dude, that's my grandma. She was like, totally. And then, that totally, my grandmother's like the loudest like church singer in El Paso apparently or something. And so, so I grew up with them listening. I mean, they were always singing and playing music. And then they'd give me like an instrument. One time they gave me like a 3/4 size, like a nylon acoustic bass, stand up. And they said, just play the notes. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I have no concept. And they're just, no, the rhythm. Just just feel it. And it was really amazing. Like the way music was just a very big part of our daily experience. There was always a moment where my grandfather was learning songs or practicing songs and my grandmother would sing. And it was great because they weren't great, amazing musicians. It was just a lot of soul. My grandmother's an amazing singer. But it's funny to watch my grandmother and grandfather after like singing and playing for years still just, like come out at different ends of the song sometimes. It's just, it wasn't about making a performance ready. It was about really just kind of exploring music in the home as a process. So, when the piano was there and I was there in the summertime with my grandparents, it was literally me on the piano for like 6 hours a day, just banging away, making triads, making little songs until, start figuring out how you do, music. And I had an uncle who was a great rock and roll singer, and he could play anything. He was a teenager and he sounded just like, Elton John and just like Led Zeppelin. And he would sing, Three Dog Night and stuff like that. And this is 1976, 77. So it was amazing the house I was living in El Paso,
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome musical heritage to have. and to have all that culture in that town. I've been through El Paso, and it's just it's got a really unique culture to it.
For sure, for sure. And it's a it's a bicultural culture, it's its own thing because everyone is aware of the other side, and everyone knows the other side because everyone's constantly crossing. So it's like, most people from that region kind of consider themselves one entity as opposed to like, whether you're American or Mexican or not. So it's like a lot of us are just both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about maybe leaving that area, ending up in LA, and did your music take you there?
No, well, my mom, she left. She took off to El Paso to LA. She had me in tow when I was about 3 or 4 years old, and so we crossed on the Mexican side on the Sonoran Desert. Like we took I remember it like a Partridge Family bus, like that
Mm-hmm.
kind of like design, like a school bus.
Mm-hmm.
It was so rickety. I mean, when we got to the border in San Isidro, it's like I was covered in like dust. It was so dusty, the desert. It was a really like long journey, I remember. But no, it was just for opportunity. It was like El Paso has always been just kind of really like like again that like weird bottleneck for everyone coming up north, and a lot of folks, especially in the 70s. Actually, after the revolution, up through the 80s, came from that part. They crossed through El Paso and came to
Okay.
Los Angeles. So, but I was constantly back and forth. I wasn't schooled there, but I was there 3 months a year, 3 solid months for most of my childhood. So, like, a lot of what I think I remember mostly about my musical education came from that. My stepfather in LA, he was very anti-music. So that's when it became a rebellion,
I see.
yeah, at 15, I was just like, all right, well, like 14, actually, 14 or 15, I was just like, all right, screw this guy. And like, that's when I said, I'm just going to do whatever I want. And like, guitar was the way to do it. Obviously, it's like everybody does it, headphones, big giant headphones, a record player, and a guitar, and that's it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I didn't.
So what was the musical background there? I mean, you had all these influences, but what was it at 15 years old that grabbed you and
Dude,
said, "I
you
want to play
know it.
music"?
I mean, first and foremost, always the Beatles. Classic rock was making its
Awesome.
big comeback right then in the like late 80s, early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I was raised on British, punk rock, British pop, the second wave of ska, which is the real ska. No, I'm just kidding. A lot of people like, I really don't like, fourth wave or whatever it is. But anyway, it was the I was really into just anything that was post punk, whether an independent, like if it was REM or The Cure or The Smiths or guitars. I loved guitar. I loved everything, honestly. Though. That was the thing. It was tough sometimes because you had to kind of you couldn't openly love Michael Jackson and like the Dead Milkmen and like whatever Led Zeppelin and like it's like you had to kind of pick your little clique. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but a lot of us in the end, shoot, we love Mexican music. We all know it, but you kind of had to, it was a weird thing. It was a weird time. You kind of had to like pick your rocker clique or your new wave goth clique or whatever it was. And, we all secretly held on to all the music we liked at home. And then, you get to high school, college, you get out and you're like, or yeah, you get to college and stuff. And you're like, all of a sudden, these eclectic, weird tastes that you have really kind of come to the fore, and you can explore them with other kids who like who are showing you their stuff that they grew up on. So
Yeah,
you know
yeah. It kind of reminds me like I sat down with my grandfather. He was in his 80s, and I was a teenager, and I was talking to him about music, and I remember like I had gotten my first like I was into just pop music, rock music, whatever, and I'd gotten my first bluegrass CD. And I
oh
remember him like looking at the names of those groups and him just lighting up and smiling, and it's like we made a connection with each other that was
yes,
cross
oh yeah,
generational. That was like, and then it's like I really dug into that, like I've got to find what's so special about that because if it brought that kind of joy to him, I know it could bring that kind of joy to me.
sure. I mean, and then you don't even realize like everything that you're really absorbing, that's not overt, that's not taught necessarily, but it's like, I mean, like for me, like the feeling. I early on I could play better than my grandfather. I could solo and I could do all these lines and stuff. Obviously, like you have facility when you're young, and it was really weird because the notes, they sounded Mexican when I played them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I just was like, oh shoot, like people would say when I recorded this stuff for PBS, I got a lot of people like calling me asking me for a record, if I had it, if I could share the music, and it was really weird because I was just making cues like. And people said, how old are you? You sound really young. I'm like, well, yeah, I'm like 25. And they're like, really? We thought you were like some 55, 60-year-old, guy with a big mustache sitting under a hacienda or sitting under whatever, a portal, and like with a big hat. They came up with the most like, stereotypical, funny, archetypal stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take offense to it. I understood what they were saying. It's just like, it's like you start kind of channeling through what you are and what has shaped you. So it's funny because it's like sometimes when I play traditional stuff, there will be jazz and there will be some rock stuff, and it's funny. I find that a lot with musicians of my generation all over Latin America. It's like they'll throw the traditional stuff into their rock music and then the rock music into the traditional stuff because that's who we are. That's you can't fight the things that you like pick up. A music teacher once said that we have the most he's a music historian actually, and he said we have the most advanced ears in history. We have every single thing pass through our genes and pass through music and pass through records, and everything that you've ever heard is in your brain. It's like once you hear it, you might hear it somewhere else and it'll spark some kind of synapse. It'll spark some kind of memory that you didn't know you had.
Right.
And, that's the power. We've seen that with those videos of like folks who have Alzheimer's. And you start playing the music from their childhoods. All of a sudden, it triggers this thing. So, early on, we know music is a real powerful thing. And for me, it was a way I was able to deal with a really tough home life here in California. I felt really isolated. So music was always my way of just it was always my escape. Early on it was piano, then it was clarinet. I started, improvising, or not improvising, but learning by ear. Benny Goodman stuff, and then, I'd show up to junior high, band class early so I could play with my, our band leader, because he was into Benny Goodman too, and he was old. So it's like, I think also appreciating old dudes, and like all the stuff old dudes had to share. I used to play Russian music in college, like, domra, like, balalaika orchestra. I played the prima domra. I was into Irish folk music. I was really into bluegrass. Anything that had like counterpoint, I really loved, because I loved even like Baroque music, and there's a lot of counterpoint in Mexican and like Afro-Cuban music. So that weird little place where, like, say the mandocello exists, where the Cuban tres exists, where these weird like tenor instruments or like violas, they're doing all this weird syncopated stuff that's underneath everybody. That's what I love the most when I hear that. So I see a lot of like parallels, especially with bluegrass music and like say son, which means song or sound. So every region has its own son. To me, it's and son literally just kind of like refers to melodic and rhythmic like structure that is characteristic. So Cuban son is its own thing, and there's sonists from the different areas, right? Every area has its own little kind of like idiosyncratic kind of take on a basic rhythm. So to me, it's like bluegrass has that. It's this repeating, and it comes from Baroque music. It's this repeating chord change that's what to expect, because it's going to repeat, and then you're playing through the chord, you're doing counterpoint while you're also doing a melody, and then you improvise off of that. That's literally like Baroque. I mean, that's where we all get it from. So I love being able to kind of see that, and then I think that has kind of also informed how I make the strings too, because it's like I don't see everything is one string for all, but I also see where things are related, and how important context is to how the music is made and what needs to happen while that music is being made. I do try to take into consideration what folks are doing with those strings, and that what instrument for what purpose. You can't, like I say, my 52 is not the same on every string, every set. Like Sometimes a 52 for a Mustang is different from a 52 for a jazz master with a set of 12s and the trebles. It's like everything is kind of really should be contextualized, I feel, especially in this era of people trying to do, high-end custom bespoke stuff. It's like, are you just adding value, or are you adding purpose? Are you addressing purpose? I don't add purpose. The purpose is there. I'm trying to like target that, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I think, that comes, I think, from listening. And that's what the guy who, Francisco, who taught us how to make strings, he would listen. He'd say, sit down and play for me. And what are you doing? And how is this working for you? Like, what are you feeling in your right hand? What are you feeling in your left hand? And the first thing he taught us is like, you think you want high tension because you want it louder, but you can make your instrument more opaque. There's only so much your instrument can take. High tension doesn't mean tone. Maybe you're playing too hard. Maybe this is all the instrument has. Like, there are all of these things to take into consideration. And all we say is we want more tension. You know what I mean? We don't really know what we're asking for when we talk about what we're trying to get out of our instruments sometimes, So he kind of informed us that way. And then it took it to the next level, because then it's like, now you start thinking about real masters, people who are building and playing amazing music and amazing instruments.
Yeah. Well, I imagine it's kind of like a huge trial and error.
Yeah.
Going from,
Yeah, I mean,
I like this thing, but I don't like this part, so let me fix this thing.
yeah. And then, like, it's like there's the three parts. There's the luthier, there's the musician, and there's the string maker. And, the musician says to the luthier, I need something to do this. So the luthier has to tell the string maker, I need something to do this. And the string maker then gives it to the player, then who the player is going to say, okay, it's doing this, and then I need this from the strings, and the string maker is going to inform the luthier. It keeps going back, and it's a circular thing, because everyone's informing each other of what's happening, and like, and I've gotten to that point, professionally, where I am talking to builders, I am talking to pedal builders even, and amp builders, and I'm talking to a lot of teachers and artists, and they're telling me what's working and what's not working from what they generally get. It's not like I'm trying to calculate from formulas. I'm literally going off of anecdotal stuff. I'm going off of what has worked. And, I have like in my head kind of like a few things, like one is a graph, just kind of where tensions lie. And, they all have these weird arcs, so I can see it kind of graphed out. And then I also have an idea of like just the construction of a lot of instruments, so the way they're braced and stuff, sometimes an instrument just might be big, but it doesn't necessarily mean it needs big fat strings, And some instruments you'll be surprised. It takes some really fat load of tension to activate, That's how we know jazz masters and jaguars work way better with 11 through 50 or 11 through 52, because you're getting that proper pressure on that, on those saddles, on the bridge. It's hard to get tone out of nines on we can try it, and that's kind of the thing. I think, it's innovation constantly informed through practice. These are all informed through practice, I think. So it's like these are professionally designed strings. I used to be one of the professionals that helped design some of them. I was on tour all the time and recording all the time. So
Yeah. Well, I want to ask about the community, the musical community you're part of. And it never occurred to me till I had been out to Winter Naum, and went to the taco party, and you exhibited a very good close-up look into kind of what's going on there in LA and in your circle, and
sure.
and how is that community shaped, the way you approach building strings?
Oh, for sure. A lot of us are, locals to this area, to the east side. And so, it's funny because, again, the people that we started out with are still doing it. It's kind of a weird thing when you realize you have this, like, cohort, and you keep on surviving. And, people in your cohort are getting Grammys and are, getting accolades and doing really amazing things. And so everyone is doing something really important, whether it's, doing work for Smithsonian, like running nonprofits, major arts organizations, things like that. are writing. A lot of my friends, are artists or they're writers, and so it's I think it's a lot of it is that people are looking for ways of doing things that are like autonomous in a sense that like what can we make, what can we do responsibly, but also what can we do that's culturally specific for what our needs are. Again, a lot of us are looking at it in terms of like artistic practices informing our business practices, and what was our experience growing up? Well, that we weren't reflected in the marketplace. When we needed strings for our instruments, they weren't there. Now they're there. Now we have generations of kids growing up with access to the best mariachi strings on the planet, and they get them and they learn and they stick with it. And then you have this big burgeoning group of kids playing music. Because everybody can count on the instruments, the teachers to be there, the strings to be there, the gigs to be there, those things. So a lot of the people that are in my community, we do think about things like that, and it is a little bit evolved in that way. It's like, it's not that we go out and say, hey, we're going to do music with this purpose and we're going to beat you over the head with a message. It's just like, oh, this is what's happening, this is what the kids are doing, this is what the established artists are doing, and we're going to do this stuff together, and maybe we're going to try to collaborate. Or it's a lot of it is just how do we keep on feeding and further establishing this community, because there had been so many reasons for it not to survive, or for it not to evolve, and a lot of it comes from financial constraints, but a lot of it is just how hard can it be, or how hard is it to be from a major media center. You're here and everyone's coming to compete here. So there's a lot of people within one small bit of bandwidth, so it's kind, what I mean? There's a lot of things going on. Like it's a tough thing. But people who are from LA, bands who are from LA, have a hard time sometimes. Like mine, we all left to tour Europe, and we got radio playing, got more tours and stuff. But come back to the States, it's tough, and it's tough. It's tough being a musician. You think it's tough being from a small town? It's tough being from a small town inside of the biggest city. Like it's just tough, right? It's tough. So it's something that I think ultimately what we prove is like the more you stick to it, the more there is to stick to, and that's really good. Like, so we try to support each other in that sense, and so when I have events, I definitely like to showcase some of the talent that I like, not just because, hey, they're my friends, or not just because, hey, it's a girl on stage. No, it's like, yo, this is what I'm digging right now, and I love these folk, and I want to support them. So we do offer that to each other a lot, and that helps. Plus, also being inclusive. We've always worked with at least people from my group in the community. We've always collaborated with different parts of town. Even to the point where like police and local gang members would be mad that we were trying to bring like hip hop and African American artists into the East Side when there was a lot of like crazy stuff going on. The cops shut us down, and we're like, but we get together all the time. We would go down to South Central for jazz and hip hop, and then they'd come up and have our our crazy events with theater and music and food and stuff like. That's what we were doing. We weren't trying to do that for any reason other than that's what we were doing. And when you realize that the local police were freaked out because they'd never seen that many black kids in our part of town. That was weird. That wasn't that long ago. That was like 20 years ago. To me, we thought we were enlightened back then. And no, there was, so, we understood the power of a lot of local, politics and stuff like that. But in the end, it's always about art. In the end, it's always about, about making it, practicing it, and, sharing it. And so, I think that's why the folks who have survived in my community, my artistic community, continue to survive, because they put that at the front. It's always about art, making art, and then teaching it. And I think probably the key is that everyone who has ever done anything has then said, okay, I've established myself as an artist, or as I'm establishing myself, I'm going to turn around and bring someone young up, or I'm going to help a master out. I'm going to, we all kind of think of that way. How do we continue this? I have to think about, who are the kids that are going to be playing my strings, in 5 years? Because 5 years ago, I would teach kids how to string up their guitars, and now they're customers. And, I don't even care that they're customers. It's just like, you know what? There were some really cool old guys when I was a kid. Very few, but they were super cool. And they would let me play a guitar off the wall, or they'd explain something to me, or they'd share, sometimes they would share a taco with me at the local guitar builder. Like, that's a big deal. Like, they let you in because you're just this, the scrappy kid who keeps showing up every weekend. I used to take the bus 2 hours to go look at guitars, by myself at 14, 15, until I could afford one. So, we all think of that. We all think of what was our experience and how could we make that experience better for younger folk or for other folk, And that way, we survive, whatever it is that we're developing musically and, culturally, or artistically, will survive as well. And I think everybody kind of is doing that. And I think everybody should do that. Like, I like it. I mean, I see a lot of people coming from a lot of different towns coming to LA. And it's like, I'm like, hey, I'm not like, hey, outsider, get out of here and go back home. But I was like, man, I really hope people can take, the freedoms that they have here and the ability to explore all of this craziness and take it home and do it, like build your artistic community at home. The entire country interior is like beckoning. It's begging for artistic, and cultural work to happen. It's like, it gives people things to do. Who doesn't like to hear free music on a Sunday afternoon? Who cares if it's kids playing, punk rock? I'll hear kids playing punk rock on a Sunday afternoon. That's cool. When I got to tour Europe, it was amazing how much music people listen to in public, together. And we need more of that. I think, so I hope people take it upon themselves to really build their local arts communities. And it's really a question of like, the best time to do it is when there's nothing to do and there's no opportunity. Is the best time to make art happen. That's when you establish the stuff. Like literally I think because we like our business, we've always also been like, cultural programmers, like what you saw, like Guadalupe, we've always hosted really great artists and we've always hosted really cool seminars or classes. I mean, it's just part and parcel to our process. That's who we are, so we continue to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. And I think if every region if people, a musician, or no matter where they're from, if they could tap into that culture and create from that standpoint, I think things would be a lot deeper.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's this community, this music from Veracruz that I was, like referring to that was like 400 years old. That again, Guadalupe was a part of, helping to revitalize. A lot of the players are also builders of guitars, and they build some amazing guitars, and they've gotten better and better. And what it is this amazing thing that I'm gonna write an article about this soon, but so I don't want to share too much about it. But it's these folk reach a level of mastery in not just guitar playing, but then there's poetry, improvisation, singing, dance, and then the final step is building guitars or building the instrument that they play. And that to me is just just amazing, and it really shows like a deeper commitment that goes beyond just the immediacy of this generation or of this moment. It's not about making a lot of money and creating a business and going to NAMM. It's about being part of this cultural thread that's centuries old, and you have to take your role seriously in it. And I like that like approach or that perspective on it. Because it's really easy to get caught up in like how many Instagram followers you have and like trying to go to NAMM and trying to get Premier Guitar, or you get talked about in Guitar Gear Page, whatever. Like a lot of those measures aren't even real, because the impact you hope is lasts beyond you.
Yeah, yeah. All that thing to me is just, icing on the cake, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky, dude. I am so blessed. I am very fortunate. I've happened upon string making. My guitar, I can't play guitar as well as I used to. My hands have really gone to pot. Some of it from string making, a lot of it from just working with my hands my entire life, and a lot of injuries. So, part of my string making now is informed on like how do I make strings for folk so that they're not destroying their hands either. So I think about that too. Like the string should really be more responsive, and the string should be more easier to play and more appropriate for the guitar and the player, so that we build better players who don't destroy themselves. Like you should be playing into your 90s like my grandfather, but he's not he's no Yngwie Malmsteen, he's no Paco de Lucia. He's my grandfather who sits and plays guitar for my grandmother to sing. There's a space for everybody and everything, but it's like for me, I just really I don't know, I try to make everything inform what I do with the string making. So again, I'm blessed. I have this thing that I do. I'm glad that people dig it, and that I'm able to make a living doing it. It's an amazing thing. And so hopefully I can have bearing on people's music making process. Hopefully it helps people make music more rewarding for them, and then maybe get a Grammy or two, which, mind you, I got a lot of folks making Grammys with my strings, man.
I know, that's awesome. That's got to be an awesome feeling to know that you're part of the process, the creative process in somebody's music making.
No, for sure. And somebody's guitar building, or or just to know that at Robert Keeley or Jamie Stillman at Earthquaker Devices, or the folks at Strymon, or or Chris Benson, all these folk, or Milkman and all these folk are using my strings as like their standard in their shops. Well, let's test it. That's cool. Like I was talking to my assistant. It's like my hope is that the strings max people's gear out. It's like, you want to hear what your pickups sound like? Well, here you go. This is the most volume I can give you for your guitar from a string. So what can your pickups really do? You know what I mean? It's like we all look to improve our rigs, right? So it's a stringed instrument. Strings are what you play more. It's the most important part. So
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask something you mentioned earlier. You said you talked about the moment that you threw the hex core away, and I guess I don't understand the physical properties. What could you talk a little bit about? Going to round core and what that did and what you found there.
Well, sure. Like I'll explain hex core really quick. And of the Dario packages and all of these companies, they all explain to you how important, how high tech hex core is, and that's fine and all. Really great pictures of actually. The thing with hex core is that it's not a perfect hexagon most of the time, and a little bit elongated. And those are 6 facets. Those are 6 sides and 6 corners that are grabbing the wrap wire. And so there's a bit of inherent obsolescence in that process, because basically every time you hit the string and you press it against the fret, you're kind of digging a sharp edge into it from the inside out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that was invented or employed. They used to call it Swedish steel. It was employed I think even starting in the 50s or 60s to start making more strings, because there was a higher demand for it. Every guitar shop, every guitar builder, like Gretsch or Fender, they used to have their own string making shops. And there were string makers all over the place. And then they started consolidating. And then once they said, why are we building these? Why don't we make it easier for the guys on these machines? And just make it so that the string grabs on, you make one size fits all, easy peasy, it's done. And that's basically what it does. And it allowed folks then to develop the bigger machines with that automatically do it. The round core has nothing to grab on. You know what I'm saying? What's it going to grab onto?
Well, that makes sense.
So yeah, but what you're getting is full contact. You're getting the integrity of the wrap wire complete. It's not being crimped. It's not being pinched 6 times, down the length of the string. That's 6 times every turn. That can be, I don't know, like how many, that could be like 36,000 crimps for all we know. That's a lot, if you ask me. So, coming up with a way of making sure that the wire stays on the round core was the first thing. And that was something that we all did as a group. I can't take credit for that, but that was something we had been trying to figure out. Because some of the lines that Francisco made did employ round core, not all of them though. And so, there were different ways. So I think I took it on the most to like figure out what the best and most consistent technique is to keep the wrap wire on the string. And that's why I think I'm one of the few people in the United States that will do like a truly handmade round core wire that is, that has some integrity and consistency. It's a hard thing to do. No one else is really doing it with the quality materials I use. That's the one thing, I know DRs out there doing, but like the quality of the nickel and the nickeled steel that I use is superior by far. Like, I mean, and there's another thing too. I formulate them very differently. I use a different math. I don't use what's called the Taylor formula. So, Taylor formula is based on hex core and the typical, like, I guess, mainstream wrap alloys. Not that I'm not using anything. I'm using just a higher quality alloy, nickel steel at 8% or pure nickel, and it's pure nickel. They're first drawn. So they haven't been recycled, resmelted, and then, whatever. Then, like, this is really good wire. I can tell the quality of wire in different wraps. Also, because of the way I formulate them, I can make a thick string, less tense, by fixing the ratio between the core and the wrap. So I tend to give a lot more wrap wire. So you get a lot more nickel in my strings, I actually took apart a Diodario. Usually I try not to pay attention to what other folks are doing. Sometimes people say, oh, I have a GA16, J4, whatever from Diodario. So I have to look up the gauges, and then I'll say, okay, I know what you're doing, and then I'll do my version, of those gauges. And it'll be very close, but not exact, So yeah, I took apart a Diodario. I think it was an Ernie Ball. I think it was an Ernie Ball 9, set of 9s, and I took apart the low E. And it was really weird because I was like, wow, this is a huge core with this thin wrap on the outside to get the low E. I'm like, that's not how I do it at all. And that was the last time I took apart a string from another company because I really didn't even want to know why. But I do know why. And it's because, it's less wrap wire, which is very expensive. I spend a lot of money on my wrap wire, and I put a lot of it on it, which is, and I'll talk about the tail in a second, because that's a big point of contention with some folk, especially with new customers. But yeah, like, the fact that, like, I think what people are used to getting is just kind of like a really limited option of formulations. And also, a hex core string doesn't cost a lot to create, honestly. And I don't mean to like diss anybody or even my good friends at like Labella or Diodario, who are great partners and clear tone strings. But honestly, a hex core string made by a machine, it's not that special. It doesn't, and I know that people have been following my price points. When I went up to 15, people went to 12. When I went to 20, people went to 15, because they're getting away with say, oh, this is a customizable string that, it's the gauges you pick, which is, what, I don't want you to tell me the gauges, honestly, because you have no clue yet of what a round core string, the way I formulate them, sounds like. You know what I'm saying? And it's almost like I always ask people, it's like, trust me the first time. If they really are just not right, we could tweak them. I understand it's an investment, but I did the work of like going on, 100 strats and, maybe about 25, 30 jazz masters and, a few jags along the way and a bunch of Gibsons, like dozens and dozens and dozens of Teles over time, so like I've done the work and I kind of know what works and how to formulate them for those guitars. So, like when people say, oh, I want a 52, well, dude, I make 3 different 52s, 4 or 5 different 52s. It's like, you're just used to that caliber, that gauge from the company you make. And most companies, mind you, make them the same way. They all use the same formula for most gauges, because they're all calculated.
Yeah. Well, I know, like when I ordered a set for my acoustic, I just went on and basically just followed what your description was. What, hey, for this style of guitar, get this,
Yeah.
and like that was very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm informed too by like just well, what did they play in the old days, and it's like I remember, and sometimes because it's like I also have a box of old strings from like the 50s and 40s, but I ask people, and I talk to people, and I remember Martin Marquis strings, and 14 was the gauge, 14 brass, that was what you played on a if you were a flat picker, 14, that's what people played back then. Now so I make them 13s and 12s for people because that's where everyone's at. And mind you, it's smarter because people should not be destroying their fingers. But even then, my 14s aren't that crazy. My 14s are a lot more comfortable to play. And so I try to balance out, like I said, a lot of things at once. But also, when people want to play flat picking, you want brass because it has more fundamental. It has less overtones. People like the brilliance of phosphor bronze. It has a lot of overtones. It's kind of got that crispy square wave sound sometimes, and that's cool. The bad side is that people have gotten used to very shiny phosphor bronze
Hmm.
strings that are coated or jangly at first. Then they go really limp and dead and dull. Whereas a string should have a nice long life. It shouldn't be terribly bright, but it should have that mid stage life for a long time. And that's what I'm getting at. It's like, I used to get kicked out of places if I showed up with a new set of strings. They'd be like, "Hey kid, you know, go play that thing at home for a few days until you bring it somewhere in public." Like that's that was anathema to have new strings. You were supposed to break in your strings, and they weren't supposed to sound super bright and thin. And I think we've gotten used to of that also in the marketplace of having very shiny phosphor bronze strings,
Hmm.
very thin, jangly. People want a weird, almost quasi acoustic sound. People getting so used to, the compressor, the reverb, the delay, and going through these, little Fender acoustic amps or whatever, the PA. And that's not the sound of the guitar. That's the sound of this very limited in scope application. But
Hmm.
it's like
Hmm.
the guitar should sound good first, and it should feel right. And so, I know the strings aren't for everyone. A lot of, I think they make great student strings, because they should last a while with a good, with a student. But it takes time, I think, to get to the place where you're going to trust me and trust the work I've done, and then trust the folks that have been saying it. Because I'm not paying, I'm not spending money on marketing. I'm not spending money on having people find creative ways of explaining what I do. It's just let it do what it does organically. I'm busy, so that's good. And so, as people talk about the string and hear this, hear and see examples of it, they see it's more than just a fancy box or something, or funky artwork, you know.
Right,
So
right.
I'm really happy with that because I want people who trust you, to listen to you because you know your audience and your audience knows you. I mean, I think that goes for everybody. So I do the same thing. It's like my audience, I'll tell them, oh, I like this pedal, I like this guitar, I like that amp, I like, and so they trust me too. And that's another that's another level of community. If you want to talk about community, it's like this community of builders and demo guys and professional touring artists. We have this cool little community where we get to share a lot of information, and I think that's what's really cool because then we can guide our customers or our audience members as best as we can. Being honest, like I never want to be a shill for any product. I don't want to pimp anything that's just novelty.
Right,
And I
right.
hope I hope people I understand. I'm not new. Our company's been around for almost 30 years with Guadalupe, and then I'm just an outgrowth. I'm just the Fender Custom Shop of Guadalupe. We're two separate entities, but that's my home. That's like my artistic, aesthetic, cultural,
Hmm.
craft work home. You know.
Hmm. I have one more question about the strings.
Sure.
Now, something that I found was different than any strings I've played before was that the round core would go up to the tuners. It would kind of
Yeah.
stop a little above the nut.
Hmm.
And I was just wanted to pick your brain on kind of why you do that. Now, I actually like it now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a departure from a lot of folk are used to, But man, if you can look at pictures of old sessions and look at pictures of folk back in the day, they would never cut their guitar strings. They would curl them up and they'd be wrapped in like cloth, the silk wrap.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of how they were keeping the strings together, mind you. That's how they were, literally constructing them to hold them together. And then after a while, exposed chords became kind of like the norm. And it's something that I remember I was looking at a piano and I was paying attention to the way the heavier bass strings were attached to the system, the tuning pegs. And because I was trying to make a really thick set of something once, and I was having problems with stuff breaking at the tuners, and it was a horrible like 2 months of just trying to figure out, so then it was like, okay, so there's certain like relationships in the thickness of the wrap to the core, to the post, how many wraps you get around the post, and sometimes the strings would be separating and weirdness was going on. So, it led me to kind of like, all right, the best thing I could do. And also because, I hate the fact that I'm going to give you 8 to 10 inches of very expensive wrap wire that you're going to throw away. And that's lame. That makes no sense. So, the piano proved to me that it could be done. It helped explain to me how to get the wraps from, protecting the wraps. Just don't put them to the post. Let the post take just the core. Why? Because between the two ends of the bridge and the nut, that's the vibrating link. We talk about this in our little string group here in LA. The vibrating link. What's between the nut and the bridge is all that matters. As long as the integrity of that is intact, nothing else matters. I could literally like, have a bare string, and as soon as it gets to the nut, the bridge, as long as it's, there's wrap wire there and wrap wire across the nut, we're not really, losing anything. All right. So yeah, so when the exposed core gets on the post, you get to put more of that strings, right? You can put 5-6 wraps and you're not really getting a lot of material on the post. You could still, tune it. And that's stronger and it's a little finer tuning because you're not tuning this big giant thick thing. Now you're just tuning the thinnest part. And so there's that. What I found with heavier strings, like say on an electric bass, I did the experiment once, it felt like, and on certain acoustic guitars, it felt like the string was allowed to vibrate even more. It kind of loosened it up, And when you talk about like say on the bridge end, you have that break angle. Well, it's kind of like there's a little bit of that going on this other end too. So in a sense, it's like because the core is what's at the post, it's allowed to almost ring a little easier. I don't know. It feels like it just unleashes it. I get a weird resonance from it that I really like. So I'm into it. So there are a lot of reasons. Part of it is mainly I'm trying to make it easier for the guitarist to not break a string and to not have any problems. So, I'm developing inserts to explain this. I'm going to put it on my Instagram and on the website. The string is long enough. Use that exposed core. Which is why I give you so many inches of it so you can see, like, use this. And, whether the wraps get around the post or not. On some guitars, it's going to go around the post because some guitars are shorter than most. And what I'm trying to do is, trying to like get it within a tolerance that I can reach about 90% of guitars. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So some are going to be, right at the post. Some are going to be before. But yeah, it's a lot of things going on at once. But you don't need the wraps going past the nut. And I think if you were able to A and B it, you'd find there's like a little bit more resonance, and it's a little. I think it does the strings some good. It doesn't hurt any, and if you get more of that core wrapped around the post, you have a stronger, safer string. That's what I'm trying to like really get. And so I also tell people, get some graphite every time you change the strings. Put a little bit of graphite on your nut. Yeah. Seriously, it just everybody should be doing that just because, you want that travel to be smooth. There's no reason to pinch the string. So, I'm just always trying to make the experience, error-free or have less errors on my end or the user's end. I know it's a different string altogether. It really is. It's not. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. People, why would you make strings? Well, it's because it works, and I've gotten results. I get long lasting strings. I have, great tone and volume. So, that's why I do it. I don't do it to make something fancy at all.
Right. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Like, anybody who's on the fence about it just needs to order a set and just try. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, just try it. And hopefully it's like, I hope people aren't being like, I hope people learn to appreciate that midlife of a string, because that's really where these strings kind of like really prove themselves. You don't want bright in the studio. You want midlife strings. You want to sound like Crosby, Stills and Nash, not like, Taylor Swift. You want to sound like, nothing against her guitar style, but it's a very thin, jangly, weak sound. Whereas when you hear, if it was Stephen Stills or whomever, playing that acoustic guitar on that first record, you're like, whoa, it's so warm, it's so earthy. What is that? Well, it's not coming from new, bright strings or coated strings. It's coming from strings that have been worn in and are consistent and you can count on, And so I want to be that string that's on the records. I want to be the string that's in folks' studios, or folks aren't going on tour. Like, I get it, but I think people should try to keep them on as long as possible. I'm thinking about, doing like, hey, for acoustics, your trebles, like, hey, you can pick up a second set of trebles or a new G and a new E, to keep up with the rest of the strings, because obviously the thinner strings get the most, the most wear, so things like that, because I understand, it is an investment. So, but a lot of times you don't need to replace the fourth, fifth, and sixth strings, unless you're trying to bend or you got just gross fingers, So I try to tell people, take care of your instrument, take care of your strings, and wipe them off, drink a lot of water, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I know it was agonizing for me to have to change my first set, because it got to the point, where, and of course I need fret work and stuff, but it got to where they were cutting into the back, and I was like, I don't know if I could play another set with these, I trust it, so I'm just going to go ahead and, change these out. But I mean, they sounded so good at that point.
Yeah, and I'm always really curious to hear people's, like, feedback. I don't necessarily need accolades off. I need, oh, hey, it's great, but, I don't mind those. I don't mind those at all. Like, because if enough people were to say, I'll keep the fifth and sixth string on forever, and the fourth string on, just maybe a new third and a new first. Sure, I'll send them out. Maybe I'll put that on the internet, or maybe I'll add them to, have certain sets with an extra G and an extra E. Why not? We've talked about it in Guadalupe days. Like, how can we make it so that people are really getting the most? Because, mind you, we were making strings for folk, bespoke strings from high quality materials, as the economy collapsed around us. So, we were like, what's the value that we can put into it too? So, whatever value we can put into it and get out of it, I think is really also, part of the deal here.
That's awesome. Well, I want to ask you two things that just anytime following you on Instagram or social media, the two things that keep coming up, Teles and tacos, and I want to talk about each of those.
Yes. Well, Tele was the first guitar that I fell in love with, so, it'll always be, I think it's what I designed them for, and that's what I tested the strings on originally, and I was touring with my Tele, and so, that's kind of like, a lot of people's like, wow, great tone, or wow, great, it feels so amazing, and that's really, so I kind of have to give it to the Tele. Like, it's like my first love in terms of electric guitar. I had a Strat first, a Harmony Strat, and then I was like, nah. Then I got a Korean Squire Tele, and I was in love. And then, I took that thing apart a million times and put it back together piece by piece just to see how to do it,
Yeah.
And I've just, there were times when I had to kind of start from scratch again, and then I put like a humbucker in it, and it ended up sounding really god awful because I reversed the wiring. But hey, it was the thing that you learned on. It's like kind of like having an old Chevy, with a V8 or V6. You learn how to change spark plugs and stuff like that. So that to me is what the Tele is. And now that I have this new Tele that it's like outfitted with all my favorite stuff, I'm like in love with it again. I switched to Jag for a second just because my hands were having a really hard time, and just the scale length, in first position was really tough. to deal with. So 24-inch scale is amazing. It's almost like I wish Teles could be 24 inches, but they wouldn't be Teles.
Yeah.
Right? You know, they wouldn't be that like awesomeness. And and I'm really happy to say that, for what it's worth, the Mastery bridge on the Tele is amazing. It's got 2 saddles instead of 3. They're stainless steel, really hard, really bright. They're so consistent. It takes the radius really beautifully. Woody at Mastery is doing amazing things. Like, I couldn't imagine this guitar without it. And I'm top loading for sure. Top loading, and like, say if we talk about top loading Teles as opposed to, say, an offset Jag or Jazzmaster or a tailpiece that has the string stretched very far, with this slight break angle. The reason why that works is because you want those thick strings on those Jazzmasters and Jaguars to really pull down, and the best way to get a thick string to not feel god awful, like tense and have a harsh sound, is to like really let stretch it over a good distance. And so that's what that tail does. And that's why Jazzmasters and Jaguars should have thicker strings, heavier strings.
No, okay.
So when you do it on a Telecaster, you're getting that part really close to the ball end. When you go towards that ball end, it gets like a little tighter, like it just sounds tighter, right? It has that more trebly, punchy sound. So, and with the break angle that's happening right behind the saddle, I think it has this really cool, bright effect on the Tele, and it makes it sound to me like a Tele. And I know a lot of Teles are stringed through, the original ones where the broadcasters, no-casters were stringed through. I just prefer it now, and so I dig it. I have Porter Customs on it, which I got years ago, and I think are probably one of my favorite sets of Tele pickups ever. I used to have the lace sensors back on my like American Standard Tele from 90 something, and they were clean for the era, when all there was Boss pedals and stuff. So, but like these pickups are pretty amazing. You can do whatever I think paired with the Emerson, pots kit, wired kit, like it really opens it up in terms of like it turns the Tele into this great workhorse. It's not super twangy Tele, and it's not super jazzy Tele. It's just it's a Tele, man. It's amazing, and it really reflects, I think, what I do, with electric guitars and stuff. And so I have a 62 custom shop neck on it, and with a rosewood fingerboard, and that one's from 1994. No, 2004. Yeah, something like no. I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember when I got this neck. It's maybe 2003 or something like that. I remember I broke the original neck, and a friend of mine from a band called Ozomatli was sponsored by Fender. And I said, dude, I need a neck. And he called the custom shop, and they kind of drop shipped one to me. It was so good, so awesome. And so I used that neck. So that neck's really nice. It's just great. I think it really kind of brings the whole Tele together. So my suggestion to folks is build yourself a Tele. It's like before you get into a custom build yourself a Tele. Just get a Mexican body, get good pots, get the harness. It's there for you, man. Get an electro socket, and invest $250 plus on the neck. Seriously, $500, $700 on a neck is good. You still walk out with a $1,200 guitar that's worth even more, and you're happy with it. Like, you feel really good about it, and pay a tech a lot of good money to like set it up, get a sign plate or something, get that shim in the neck pocket or whatever you got to do to make it play right. It's such a rewarding guitar, and it's so versatile. So yeah, and tacos right now, my taco spot is like all about, it's right like 2 blocks away from here. It's where I go get my car wash and my oil change, and then like they have a taco stand that like operates there. Yeah, so it's kind of like really hidden, and that's why I try not to tell people, but I gotta share it with the world at some point, because it's already getting full, and like a lot of the places I go, it's like all of a sudden it's like 50 hipsters show up the next week, and you're like, the what's funny is the taco guys don't mind at all. They love it. Like taqueros, they dig it. They love it when I bring Mason Stoops and the entire entire LA guitar crew to with their taco. So yeah, this one right now is really awesome because they make the tortillas by hand, which is it's always been a thing, but now it's like huge thing in Boyle Heights and East LA. And so, and it's also really good because it keeps the tortillas from being very greasy. A good taco from a taquero is generally the tortillas soaked in grease. But when they're handmade from scratch, handmade on the spot, they're very moist, and you only get one, and it's a whole different thing. I mean, there's obviously a little bit of oil to bind it, but it's so much richer. And then these folk also, they use mesquite to cook the meat. So that's actually really big right now. So to me, it smells like Juarez, like El Paso to me. So yeah, like right now I'm in love with my neighborhood because it just really smells like El Paso in the summer. And so you have this mesquite burning, wood, grill, and then they have like carne asada, and then they have this thing, chorizo from where is this one from? Michoacan. Okay. And it's dry, it's drier, it's very aromatic. And so they roast all of the stuff, or they grill it, and then they chop it up together. And that's my taco, is chorizo with carne asada. And then what's cool is they kind of look like little like Japanese hand rolls. Like they're each individually wrapped like in a cone with paper. And what's cool is it's like you don't tell people what to put on it. Like they just make, like, it's like a good sushi chef. He makes you the perfect piece of sushi as he knows. He doesn't care if you prefer this or not, or how much, it's like literally that's what, you get. And when you go with that, I think at a taco spot, and you say, no, you give it to me how you like what's the best way to serve a taco? That's how you eat it, because it's like kind of showing off the taco builder's like skill, like the balance of cilantro and cebolla or onion, and what color salsa. Like, taqueros are very specific about red or green on what meat, and then just the right amount of guacamole, and the consistency of the guacamole that they use. So, these tacos right now, I dream about them. Right, I'm like literally now. I'm kind of like about to go and sneak over there. Actually, they're not around on Mondays. That's the sad thing. Mondays and Tuesdays they don't operate. Yeah. Oh, what'd you do to me? So yeah, no, I mean, but tacos is also a great way of like kind of like it's kind of become our local like calling card in LA, and it's a way that a lot of people like participate together in our local culture. And it's also, to me, it's beautiful entrepreneurship. It's like folks out in the street just, hey, this is what I do. They feed you, and they feed you this beautiful, heartfelt food. The way the guys and the men and the women who make tacos, it's with a lot of love, and they're really showing off, their culture, their local culture from their hometown, and also just, it's just this way of sharing time together. And to me, it reminds me of my time with my grandfather when my grandmother would go, do some church stuff at night. He and I would get literally dressed up, and then we'd, get in the van, go to Juarez, and then he'd take me to all the spots with all the other old men, to the barber shop, and then we'd go to like get a taco here, and then go over here to get like, shave ice, or over here to get a juice or licuado, like a smoothie, and we just tour around downtown El Paso and downtown Juarez, just kind of like just a little taco tour,
Yeah.
And that was really cool. Like that's to me, it's like to me, it's this way that we share our culture and share love and information and pass on our traditions. So right now, my son's all into tacos too, which is like the best feeling when he like says, "Oh, tacos!" Like, yeah, dude, let's do it.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And so I like sharing those with folk, and like we have peaceful time. I'm a very politically vocal person, and I'm a very active person, and but to me it's like, when we share a taco, that's like we're sharing some love, we're sharing humanity, it's really an opportunity to really be human with each other, and and I think that's kind of like sacred to me. That's sacred ground.
Yeah,
music and tacos are sacred places.
Absolutely, and there's so much community in both.
For sure. Oh, dude, I mean, I'm an eater. I will go anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and eat and enjoy it. Like, I love eating what people serve me. Like, I love listening to the music people play. I love DJs who pick the music, like, I love that because I don't have to do it, and they're giving me what they feel. And like, that's how I hope people can like take my strings too. It's like, hey, this is what I'm offering to you before you tell me you want this exact gauge and the specific thing and intention. How about you give me a chance to serve you my taco, my string taco, as I do it, as I've kind of come to it, and then we can work together from there, And if you don't like it, well then, I'll figure it out, I'll fix it. But most of the time, I'd say like about 90% of the time, I get a good response, and people trust me, and we build a good relationship that way. And I like to have that relationship with my customers. Even if I don't see them often, we keep in touch on the internet. That's what it's for.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I couldn't say that. Just do that. Like, listeners, if you want to try out a set, just go to his website, and if you've got a Taylor or a Martin or play a Tele, whatever, like just take his advice and order that set, because so yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on and just chatting about all these things: tacos,
Talking your
Teles,
ear off,
strings.
yeah. I tacoed your ear off. I know.
It's been an amazing time, and I sure appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show.
Dude, I love what you're doing. I love our community. I love all the podcasters and the demoers and the reviewers and everyone, because I think it's like, it's such a vital part of my daily life for me personally. Like, this is, you guys are the people I talk to the most. I'm usually like hunkered away in my shop shack, like just making strings and stuff. So I appreciate like really all the work that everyone in and around our like builder community, and whether, I don't know, I guess it's boutique, I don't know, but I think it's cool that we're all like in it together, and like I hope we can all kind of keep on doing this. I hope that the bubble never bursts.
Absolutely, I hope it never does. And it's a really cool place to be as a musician, in that corner.
For sure, man.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk later, man.
Yeah, I'll see you on the internet, man.
All right, thank you.